Greetings. This is Diane Wingert, the host of the Driven Woman Entrepreneur Podcast. I want to thank you for joining me, whether you are here live at 9 a.m. Pacific, 11 o'clock Central, or noon Eastern on Friday, December the 2nd. As always, on these Friday live streams, I riff a little bit or do a deeper dive or share personal stories, examples, or anecdotes about the topic of this week's podcast episode. If you haven't already listened to it, this week my guest was Sandra Scaiano. She is someone that I have known of for the last several years in an online membership community we are both part of, but for whatever the reason, we didn't get to actually know each other and spend time with one another until recently. Sandra interviewed me for her wonderful podcast called The Long Game, and I interviewed her for the Driven Woman Entrepreneur podcast. Now, Sandra and I have a lot in common, even though I'm West Coast, she's East Coast. She's a little bit younger than I am, and she is a website developer, whereas I am a former psychotherapist turned business coach. But one of the things that we have in common, and it was a big topic of our conversations for both podcast interviews, was how we both believe in playing the long game. In fact, she named her entire podcast The Long Game. I believe that playing the long game is one of the key characteristics that I look for in someone who chooses to hire me and I accept them as a client. And the reason for this goes back to my previous career. I'm going to dial back all the way to, I think we're talking early 90s. I was in my second career as a psychotherapist, and I was a college professor, and I was supervising and training other people who were coming into the field. And when I started supervising graduate students in social work who were on their way to becoming clinical social workers and psychotherapists, I was deciding who I wanted to bring into the program and personally supervise. There were lots and lots of people who wanted to train at Children's Hospital Los Angeles, where I was working. And so we could be picky, which is a great position to be in. One of the first questions I would ask every one of these potential supervisees was, what brought you to this field? Because it's my personal opinion that most of us don't end up doing what we're doing completely by accident. Now, it's true, sometimes you fall into a field because it's a family business, or because everyone in your family is in healthcare or in accounting or in law or whatever the case may be. But there are so many options these days that most of us really do try to enter a field that we're interested in, that we're attracted to, and that we're willing to work in. Maybe not for our entire working life, but for a considerable period of time, especially if we required a lot of education or training to enter that field. Certainly in the case of being a psychotherapist, there is a lot of education and a lot of training. So one of my first questions was, what brought you to the field? And I would always get very interesting stories from people. And lots of times people grew up with a very challenging childhood. I'm one of those people. So that's kind of a natural attraction to the field of social work or psychotherapy, because someone who's been through a lot often has acquired skills that can be helpful to other people who are going through a lot. There are many other reasons for people choosing the field, but what I wanted to highlight was my second question. My second question of every potential trainee was, so how long do you want to be in this field? Now, to put things in context, these are people who aren't even in the field yet, who are literally in their first or second year of graduate school in anticipation of entering the field, but they've got a ways to go. And here I am, an experienced person in the field, asking them, how long do you intend to be in this field? Most of them are really caught by surprise, and I must admit, it's not your typical question. I don't know of anyone who actually asks this type of question of trainees. But I was interested and whether or not they had given it any thought. Because if we decide to do something for a long time and we make that decision ahead of time, we are going to go about every other decision we make for as long as we are in that, in this case, occupation, in a very different way. I'm going to put it a different way. The way you enter a romantic relationship, for example, when you are just looking for a hookup, or you're just looking for a fling, or you're looking for a summer romance because you're going back to school or whatever, you're going to go about every other decision you make in that relationship than if you are looking for someone to marry, have a family with, and spend the rest of your life being a partner to, right? That just makes sense, doesn't it? I mean, if you're just looking to hook up, you technically don't even need to know the person's name, right? I mean, it might be better to know that they're clean and safe for you to hook up with, but if you're looking for someone to marry, that's playing the long game. So if you are a person who has the audacity to leave the predictable, maybe not as secure as it used to be, but a corporate career, a nonprofit career, an academic career, the kind of people I tend to work with, and start your own business, I think it is extremely important to contemplate from the get-go, maybe even before you make that decision, how long do I want to do this? I've worked with a number of serial entrepreneurs, and oftentimes they don't make that decision before their first business. But after they have turned over a few businesses, they've launched something, they've grown it, they've scaled it, they've leveraged it, and then they sold it. And now they're on to the next thing. They usually have a very clear idea of how long they intend to do something. Same thing if you intend to flip real estate. Or I want to have the experience, let's say, for example, somebody wants to have the experience of living in another country. You're going to go about those decisions very, very differently if you are looking to, let's say, do a semester abroad as a college student versus I don't want to live in Canada, the US, the UK, wherever it is you live. I don't want to live here anymore. I want to relocate. I want to obtain citizenship, and I want to permanently reside in another country. Every single decision you make is different. I've given you a bunch of different examples for I'm going to do a semester abroad versus I want to move and become a permanent citizen of another country. I want to have a hookup or a fling or a summer romance versus I'm looking for someone to partner with for life. And in the business, so many people are starting businesses. A lot of people started businesses during the first year of the COVID pandemic because they weren't able to go to their workplace. They didn't feel comfortable going to their workplace, or they simply lost their job because of all the changes that were ushered into society for all of us. A lot of people decided to start a business. And in truth, it just keeps getting easier to start a business in the online space. The technology keeps getting more simple and more streamlined and more user-friendly. One of the groups that is growing very rapidly is what I call encore entrepreneurs, people who are starting their very first business in the online space after retirement, people over 65. So thinking about the long game, thinking about how long do I intend to do this? I mean, if you just want to have an experiment and see how it feels to be an entrepreneur, you're not going to invest a lot of money. You're going to try to DIY it. You're going to try to bootstrap it. You might want to join a low price membership of some sort, but you'll probably just be in a lot of face group with other beginners because it's an experiment. You're not committed. You're trying it out. So it makes sense to make decisions that are appropriate to that choice versus the person who says, I am an expert in my field. I have spent 10, 20, 30, however many years developing my thought leadership. And now I want to start a consultancy that I will continue to operate for as long as I continue to work. Many people these days have no intention, and in many cases, no opportunity to retire in their 60s. I have a very good friend who has a female boss who is a CEO of a very successful financial services company. And the woman is, I think, at last count, 92. I used to work with a gentleman who is in mergers and acquisitions, and his wife was really encouraging him to retire. He was still working almost full time and well into his 80s. So if we are playing the long game, we don't intend to sell our business. We intend to continue working in our business. Perhaps over the years, we want to work less. Or if we are starting that business in our 20s or 30s, and we want to be able to maintain it at a certain size, maybe during our active duty child rearing years, then maybe grow it in our 50s and 60s, and then maybe shrink it down or bring other people in our 70s or beyond. We can now do that. So, some other thoughts about playing the long game. I think some of the mistakes that so many of us make when we start a business, and especially for women, because most of the people I work with are women, and of course I am one too. We are guided by passion and or purpose. Playing the long game absolutely demands, insists upon, requires that you also are paying attention to profit. It's like the trifecta. Passion is the fuel, purpose is the focus, and profit allows you to play the long game because it keeps your business viable. It allows you to sustain it. And when you are profitable, you have enough resources to invest in the growth of the business and invest in yourself as the business owner. And I think many, many, many of the women that I have met and some of the women I have worked with as a coach and strategist have not been paying close enough attention to the profit. There's many reasons for that I have spoken about on other live streams, so I will just briefly reference the fact that most women are not part of the conversations about money that most men are. So we may have a real blind spot there. And that means that if we are only paying attention to what we feel passionate about and starting a business around our passion, or starting a business because we have a sense of purpose to serve a particular group of people in a certain way, the profit potential of the business also has to be part of our focus so that we can play the long game. Now, what are some other considerations for the long game? Well, in my conversation with Sandra Sciano, and I really want to encourage you to listen to this week's episode of the podcast. It was a fantastic conversation. As a matter of fact, I've had the same podcast editor for the last couple of years, and every once in a while she'll say, I really, really loved editing this particular episode because it was such a good conversation. I ask her every week to identify 2 quotes from each episode. whether they're things I said on a solo episode or things my guest said on a guest interview episode. And she came back to me with this one saying, there are no less than 5 quotes that we need to share from this episode. I can't restrict myself to just 2. That's how good it is. So if you haven't listened, I'm just saying you should listen. At any rate, what Sandra said in this interview that I think was so valuable and I really think bears repeating now is that what she believes makes a business sustainable is not just the passion and the purpose and the profit. Those are absolutely necessary. Her perspective is that we need to infuse our business with joy. Joy as a starter, like lighter fluid, joy as a fuel for getting us through the hard times because every business has them. Joy as your guiding star, your compass when you're fatigued, you're ill, profits are down, maybe you lose a key team member, and joy to sustain you over time. Because once the new and shiny wears off, some people feel a little bored in their own business, and many people never expected that to be the case. So they think, oh, something's wrong. I don't love my business anymore. Well, I believe that there are ways to create joy, to increase joy, and to infuse joy into everything you do in business. And Sandra absolutely believes that without joy, you can't play the long game. You will either go out of business because you're not giving your business the attention and focus and effort that it needs, or you'll just close it, sell it, stop doing it. Because owning your own business is a lot of work. It is truly a lifestyle, and it's not for everybody. Joy allows you to love the process, not just the results. So I really loved that she said that. I also really love that she says now she has a creative business. She develops websites for female entrepreneurs. She does an excellent job of it. But she believes that what allows her to play the long game is the intersection of strategy and creativity. I know if you're all strategy and there's no creativity, your business will not be attractive to others. And if you're all creativity without strategy, I promise you, you're going to waste a lot of time, a lot of energy, a lot of money starting things you don't finish and starting things that are out of order and starting things that are not at the right time, starting things that your audience doesn't want and won't buy. So we really do need both. The last thing I want to share with you from the interview that was so valuable was having the courage to be our most authentic self. A lot of people are talking about authenticity. In fact, it's probably one of the most frequent buzzwords in the coaching industry that I see and read and hear literally every day, if not multiple times a day. But authenticity can't really be manufactured. And the people who do manufacture it, it really does not come across as authentic. Authenticity is really the organic, genuine expression of who you truly are. How you speak, how you dress, how you think, the unique way that you do whatever it is you do for others with your personality stamped all over it. There are so many business strategists and coaches and mentors out there. I have no idea how many, but there's only one me. There's only one you. So having the courage to allow people to see who you are. I mean, you don't have to tell them everything, show them everything, but like, for example, I swear a lot in my real life. So if I didn't swear on my podcast and with my clients and use colorful language in my marketing, I would not be being authentic. I'm very opinionated. I'm very direct. If I was concerned about being opinionated and direct because I thought it would turn people off, so I modified those traits in my marketing, two things would happen. The wrong people would find their way to me. And if they made the mistake of hiring me and then I showed them who I really was, there would be a problem. But more important than that, the just right people, the perfect fit people, the really truly ideal clients would not find me. Because the people that are going to be your most enthusiastic clients, followers, subscribers, supporters, enthusiasts, those who will recommend you and refer to you, your raving fans, they're never, ever going to find you if you don't have the guts to show people who you really are, who you really are. And I know that that can seem really scary because the internet can be a cruel place. A lot of people I know and work with have rejection sensitivity. It's one of the key areas that I work on with my coaching clients because being afraid of being criticized or judged or rejected will stop the best, the boldest, the brightest of us from being out in the world and letting people know who we are. And I personally think when it comes to the internet, when it comes to business, when it comes to marketing, what the world does not need now is more same, same. More me too, just like everybody else. The world needs you, all of you, genuine you. And that was what a big part of my conversation with Sandra Sciano was about on the podcast, is like having the guts to show people who you genuinely are, infusing joy into your business, and playing the long game from the get-go. I remember living in Burbank, California. It's where I raised my kids, and I lived for about 20 years. And I remember there were a few houses in our neighborhood where all of the homes were built in the 1930s. They were all about the same size, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, 3 bedrooms, 2 bath. And there was this one home that I think had started off as a 2+1, and the people added on, and they added on, and they added on, and they added on. And over time, this house looked like Frankenstein's monster. It looked like it had been cobbled together from all kinds of pieces and parts that it was just so obvious that it was not intended from the beginning to be a house of that size and configuration. And I have nothing against home improvement. I'm a huge fan. But I think that's the opposite of playing the long game. Is starting off thinking, this is what I'm going to do. And then trying to keep adding things to it that the foundation won't hold up to. So instead of listening to all the people out there saying 6 weeks or 6 months to 6 figures and hustle, hustle, hustle and race to the finish line, and I can help you get there faster, and I can turn on the spigot and have leads and clients like flowing to you. Play the long game, build the foundation, build it to last, slow your roll a little bit, Maybe that means it's going to take you a little bit longer to get to where you want to go. But if you're infusing joy into the process, you can enjoy the process, not just the result. There's so much uncertainty, unpredictability, fear, and doubt in every entrepreneur's journey. And yes, we make mistakes. And believe it or not, a lot of things are simply out of our control. So you might as well set yourself up for success and enjoy every step of the journey. It took me a long time to start my first business, and I can't imagine any other lifestyle now after 12 years. Wish I'd done it sooner. So set yourself up for success. Set yourself up to play the long game. Infuse your business with joy. Pay attention to your profits. And remember, it's not creativity or strategy, it's both. Thank you for joining me. I'll be back next week with takeaways from my next solo episode, where I will be talking about the difference between a business coach, a business consultant, and a business strategist, and break down who to hire for what type of problem and when. I'll join you next week. Bye for now.